For 8 months, nobody had seen Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster fire her weapon in combat. Then, 50 enemy fighters surrounded her unit in a dense European forest, cutting off every escape route, and professional soldiers with years of experience started dying in a perfectly executed ambush. The Ranger team had maybe 5 minutes before complete annihilation. That's when Ariana climbed to high ground, 1,200 meters away, looked through her scope at shots that violated every principle of possibility, and reminded everyone why she'd been hiding her skills. Before we show you what happened when she finally pulled that trigger, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and hit subscribe. Because what came next turned certain death into a tactical masterpiece that rewrote the rules of long-range combat. The morning fog was so dense it felt like moving through wet cotton. Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster stood at the edge of Forward Operating Base Sentinel, watching the Eastern European forest disappear into gray nothing while her unit prepared for what command had called a routine reconnaissance patrol. She was 29, medium height, lean from years of carrying heavy equipment through impossible terrain. Dark hair pulled back in a braid that disappeared under her patrol cap. Unremarkable in every way the military had taught her to be, except for the way she moved. Precise, economical, like someone who'd calculated the energy cost of every action and eliminated waste. The XM-110 semi-automatic sniper system rested against her shoulder with familiar weight. 7.62 by 51 millimeters NATO, capable of precision fire out to 800 meters officially, though Ariana had made shots at distances that would make manufacturers nervous. Semi-automatic capability meant multiple rapid precision shots, in the right hands, devastating. She hadn't fired it in combat in 8 months. Sergeant First Class David Torres was doing final equipment checks, his movements reflecting 15 years of leading Rangers through places where mistakes got people killed. 36, built like someone who'd carried heavy loads up mountains, eyes that constantly scanned for threats. "Foster, you're with Davidson on Overwatch," Torres called out, consulting his tactical map. "Heavy vegetation in Sector 9. I need early warning and target identification." "Copy that, Sergeant," Ariana replied, her voice carrying the flat professionalism that made people think she had the personality of a field manual. Corporal Ethan Davidson was her spotter, 23, intelligent eyes that saw details others missed, still young enough to believe he understood combat. He'd worked with Ariana for 4 months and spent most of that time trying to figure her out. "So Vegas has a pool going," he said as they loaded equipment into the Humvee. "Whether you'll actually take a shot on this deployment or just keep cosplaying as a sniper." Ariana checked her rifle without looking at him. "Maybe you should focus on your job instead of gambling, Davidson." The other Rangers chuckled. Over 8 months she'd earned respect for everything except the one thing she was trained to do. Navigation better than specialists, intelligence assessments that were consistently accurate, could call fire missions that made artillery officers jealous. But shooting? Actually engaging targets with that precision rifle? Nobody had seen it. Specialist Luis Reyes, their medic, spoke up from across the vehicle. "Leave her alone, Davidson. Some people contribute in ways that don't involve showing off." "I'm not showing off, I'm just saying..." "You're saying shut up and check your equipment," interjected Staff Sergeant Kyle Morrison, the assistant team leader. 32, quiet competence, the kind of NCO who led by example. "We're rolling in 5. The convoy departed at 0700, 3 vehicles, 14 Rangers, heading into terrain that made conventional warfare look simple. Ancient forest, canopy so thick satellites couldn't penetrate, underbrush dense enough to hide entire units. Perfect ambush country. Ariana watched the landscape through tinted windows, her mind already calculating angles and distances. Every hill was a firing position. Every clearing was a kill zone. Every shadow could hide threats. The forest swallowed them within minutes. They dismounted at coordinates that looked identical to everywhere else. Trees, undergrowth, the smell of damp earth and decomposition. Torres organized them into patrol formation, point element, main body, rear security, with Ariana and Davidson positioned for overwatch. "Remember, this is reconnaissance," Torres reminded them quietly. Observe and report. We're not here to start a war, just to see if anyone else is planning one. They moved into the forest like professionals, slow, deliberate, minimizing noise and signature. 14 rangers disappearing into vegetation so thick you could lose someone at 10 meters. Ariana and Davidson took position on a ridge overlooking the patrol route. This was her element: patient observation, careful calculation of fields of fire, constant assessment. Through her scope, she tracked the patrol's movement while simultaneously scanning beyond them, watching for unnatural patterns in vegetation, birds flushing from specific locations, light reflecting off metal or glass. "Serious question," Davidson said quietly, his spotting scope covering different sectors. 8 months without firing a shot. That's gotta be a record. Were you always like this, or did something happen? "My job is to shoot when shooting solves problems," Ariana replied emotionlessly. "Not to shoot because someone needs to prove something." What Davidson didn't know, what only Torres knew, and even he only knew fragments, was that Ariana Foster had more confirmed kills than anyone in the battalion. Just not recently. Not since the incident that had gotten her quietly transferred from a unit where precision elimination was the primary mission to a conventional ranger company where she was supposed to blend in. The incident involving a shot that should have been physically impossible, a target that should have been untouchable, and consequences classified at levels that made flag officers uncomfortable. The patrol continued for 90 minutes without incident. They covered 4 kilometers of difficult terrain, documenting old fighting positions, abandoned equipment, evidence that this forest had seen combat before. Then, at 0947 hours, everything changed. Torres's hand signal, halt, followed immediately by enemy contact. The patrol froze, rangers taking cover behind trees and terrain features, weapons oriented toward threats. Ariana's scope was already searching before Davidson could ask questions. She found them instantly. Movement in the tree line 450 meters north. Not 1 or 2 fighters, multiple figures moving with military precision. "Contact north," she murmured into her radio. "Multiple combatants. Estimate platoon strength moving to flank." Torres responded immediately. "Copy. Foster, maintain observation. All elements prepare to displace." Before anyone could move, the forest exploded. The ambush was textbook perfect. 3 elements, 1 blocking advance, 1 cutting retreat, 1 attacking from high ground. 50 enemy fighters against 14 rangers, positioned to maximize their advantage. Automatic weapons fire tore through vegetation. Rounds snapped past positions, thudded into trees, kicked up dirt. The rangers returned fire instantly, training overriding fear even as they realized how badly outnumbered they were. "Contact front! Contact rear! We're fucking surrounded!" someone shouted over the radio, voice fighting to be heard over gunfire. Ariana watched through her scope with detachment that would seem cold to anyone who didn't understand that emotional distance enabled precision. She could see the entire tactical picture, rangers pinned in a natural depression with limited cover, enemy elements converging from 3 directions, mathematics calculating toward a very bad conclusion very fast. "Foster, I need suppressive fire on that northern element." Torres's voice cracked through the radio, stress evident despite professionalism. "They're about to overrun Reyes's position." Davidson was already ranging targets. 450 meters, wind left to right, multiple movers in heavy cover. "You want to start with—" "No," Ariana said quietly. "What?" "Torres just gave you a direct—" "The northern element is a feint," she interrupted, eye never leaving her scope. "The real threat is on that ridge at 1100 meters. They're setting up a PKM machine gun that will have clear fields of fire over our entire team. Once operational, everyone down there dies." Davidson swung his spotting scope to her indicated position. Several seconds passed before he even found it, partially concealed, using terrain defilade, exactly where a competent commander would place their devastating weapon. "Okay, I see them. So we call it in, get Torres to—" "No time. They're operational in 90 seconds. Ariana's hands made scope adjustments, breathing slowing into controlled rhythm. "And we're 1,200 meters out." 1,200 meters? Davidson's voice cracked. "Through this vegetation? Moving targets? That's impossible." 5 impossible shots. Ariana corrected conversationally despite chaos erupting below. Machine gun, gunner, assistant gunner, loader, and their squad leader directing setup. Miss anyone, they go operational and kill everyone. The forest had become hell. Grenades detonated among ranger positions. Reyes was screaming over radio about wounded. Morrison shouting they were low on ammunition. "Foster, I'm serious," Davidson said, real fear in his voice for the first time. "That's beyond maximum effective range through concealment on movers. Even the best sniper alive couldn't." "I am the best sniper alive," Ariana said quietly. "That's why they sent me here to hide." "Now shut up and call my shots." Her finger found the trigger. Breathing reached that perfect pause between inhalation and exhalation. The world narrowed to a reticle, the target 1,200 meters away. Moving with confidence, they were too far to engage, and the mathematics of making bullets defy probability. The XM-110 semi-automatic capability meant she could fire rapidly. Most snipers would shoot, assess, correct, shoot again. Methodical. Ariana didn't have time for methodical. The first shot broke like thunder. The rifle cycled automatically, ejecting brass and chambering fresh rounds while the first bullet flew. She fired again before the first impacted, then third, fourth, fifth. 5 shots in 2.8 seconds, each with minute adjustments for wind, elevation, target movement that her brain calculated faster than conscious thought. Through her scope, she watched results in compressed combat time. First round struck the gunner center mass as he settled behind his weapon. He dropped without understanding what killed him from over a kilometer away. The assistant gunner looked up confused and caught the second round at the base of his neck. He spun away permanently. The loader was reaching for ammunition when the third shot found him, punching through his chest. The squad leader was moving, instincts screaming danger, but Ariana had anticipated. Fourth shot dropped him mid-stride. Fifth shot hit the PKM itself, destroying the weapon even if someone else tried using it. The round struck the receiver and rendered it scrap metal. 5 targets at 1,200 meters through heavy vegetation. 5 shots, 5 hits, 2.8 seconds. The forest went silent for a heartbeat. Even enemy combatants seemed confused by their most dangerous asset being eliminated by an invisible threat from an impossible distance. Davidson stared at Ariana like she'd performed black magic. "Holy shit, how did you—" "Questions later," Ariana interrupted, already acquiring next targets. "Right now we finish this." She transitioned to the northern element, moving to overrun ranger positions. They were closer, only 550 meters. Making them trivially easy by comparison. Her rifle spoke repeatedly, semi-automatic capability allowing engagement of multiple targets faster than they could react. Each shot was placed with surgical precision, not just hitting targets, but hitting them to maximize psychological impact. Leaders dropped first, destroying command. Then, crew-served weapon operators, eliminating heavy firepower. Then, anyone trying to rally others. The enemy force that had been confident in numerical superiority suddenly found themselves systematically dismantled by an opponent they couldn't see, locate, or fight. Some tried returning fire in estimated directions, but they were shooting at ghosts. Ariana and Davidson were in heavy cover at extreme range, effectively invisible. Down in the valley, Rangers realized what was happening and pressed their advantage. Torres organized a counterattack, his team moving with renewed aggression against an enemy suddenly concerned with threats from entirely different directions. "Southern element breaking!" Davidson called out, watching through his spotter scope as enemy fighters began retreating. "They're running!" But Ariana was already tracking them. Running was fine, meant they weren't threatening her rangers, but she made sure they understood the cost of this ambush. Selective shots dropped anyone still carrying weapons or trying to coordinate fighting withdrawal. The enemy had started this fight with tactical superiority, numerical advantage, and perfect positioning. Now they were learning the hard lesson that advantages meant nothing when facing someone who could reach out and touch them from distances they thought were safe. Ariana's rifle continued its methodical work. Each shot was a calculation, a decision, an execution. She wasn't shooting out of anger or revenge. Emotion had no place in precision fire. She was solving a tactical problem, and the solution involved making sure the enemy understood that ambushing American Rangers came with consequences. Through her scope, she watched their formation completely collapse. What had been a coordinated military operation devolved into individuals making survival decisions. Some dropped their weapons and ran. Others tried to carry wounded. A few attempted to provide covering fire, but they were shooting blind at a threat they couldn't locate. Davidson was calling out observations, his voice carrying a mix of professional assessment and barely controlled awe. Eastern Group is in full retreat. Western Element has stopped advancing. They're taking cover. Northern Element. Jesus, Foster, there's nobody left in the Northern Element. Then we shift to the Western Element, Ariana replied calmly, her scope already tracking toward new targets. They're the last organized resistance. The Western Element had taken cover behind a natural berm, trying to reorganize. Their commander, distinguishable by his positioning and the way others oriented toward him, was attempting to restore order, get his people fighting instead of panicking. Ariana watched him through her scope, calculated the shot, accounted for wind, distance, the slight downward angle. Then she made a decision that was both tactical and psychological. Instead of shooting the commander, she shot the ground directly in front of him. The bullet impacted with enough force to kick up dirt and rock fragments, making him flinch and dive for better cover. Then she shot again, closer this time. Then a third shot that passed so close to his position he could probably hear the supersonic crack. She was sending a message. I can kill you whenever I want. Right now, I'm choosing not to. Run while you still can. The message was received. The Western Element broke completely, abandoning their positions and fleeing into the forest. The commander was one of the first to run, his survival instincts overriding his military discipline. The engagement lasted 19 minutes from first contact to final shot. When it ended, 50 enemy combatants had been reduced to scattered survivors fleeing through forest, leaving behind dead, wounded, and weapons. The Rangers held the field with 0 fatalities, though Reyes was treating multiple wounded. The ambush that should have destroyed them had been broken by precision fire from distances most people wouldn't believe possible. Torres's voice came over radio, calm but carrying undertones of awe. Foster, Davidson, link up with main body. We're consolidating and calling medevac. Ariana safed her weapon and began breaking down her position with the same methodical precision she'd used to establish it. Davidson was still staring. Who the hell are you really? He finally asked. Your designated marksman, Ariana replied, standing and shouldering her rifle. Same as yesterday. Help me police brass and let's move. They made their way to where Rangers were establishing defensive perimeter. The difference in how everyone looked at Ariana was immediate and obvious. Before, she'd been the quiet one who never shot. Now she was something else. Dangerous, respected, maybe feared. Torres met her at the perimeter, expression carefully neutral. Hell of a performance, Foster. Just doing my job, Sergeant. At 1,200 meters, through vegetation, 5 shots in under 3 seconds. He shook his head slowly. 15 years in the Army. Never seen anything like that. Reyes approached, blood on his hands from treating wounded, but gratitude on his face. 4 of my casualties would be killed in action if you hadn't broken that ambush. Thank you. Morrison came up next, his usually quiet demeanor replaced with something approaching reverence. That machine gun position, I didn't even see it until you started shooting. If they'd gotten that thing operational. They didn't, Ariana said simply. That's what matters. Private First Class Tyler Brooks, one of the younger Rangers who'd been pinned down in the worst of the fighting, couldn't contain himself. Ma'am, I counted at least 23 shots. Did you miss any? Ariana considered the question. No. The single word hung in the air. 23 shots, 23 hits, at ranges from 550 to 1,200 meters, through heavy vegetation, on moving targets, under combat stress. Brooks's expression suggested he'd just had his understanding of what was possible fundamentally altered. Davidson sat beside Ariana while they waited for transport, cleaning his spotting scope. Oh, that thing people whisper about. The incident that got you transferred involved shooting? "You're smart enough to stop asking questions," Ariana replied, but her tone was gentler than words suggested. "Fair enough," he paused. "For what it's worth? Glad you're on our side." "Me too, Davidson. Me too." The after-action review happened in a secured briefing room. The battalion commander was present, along with company commander and intelligence officers who'd arrived from higher headquarters specifically to understand what happened. Torres walked them through the tactical situation using maps and imagery, showing how they'd been ambushed and surrounded. Then came the part explaining survival. Staff Sergeant Foster engaged from elevated position at ranges exceeding 1,200 meters. Initial targets were enemy crew-served weapons posing greatest threat. Follow-on engagements systematically eliminated enemy leadership and heavy weapons, breaking their attack and forcing withdrawal. The battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel James Hendricks, studied the map with an expression trying to reconcile what he heard with what he knew to be possible. 52, combat veteran, the kind of officer who'd seen everything until now. "Sergeant Torres, you're telling me one sniper with a semi-automatic rifle engaged and eliminated multiple targets at ranges well beyond standard effective distance through heavy vegetation with sufficient precision and speed to break a coordinated ambush?" "Yes, sir. That's exactly what I'm telling you." Hendricks turned attention to Ariana, standing at attention with rigid professionalism, suggesting she really didn't want this conversation. "Staff Sergeant Foster, where did you train?" "Multiple locations, sir. Standard Army Sniper School, then advanced courses through Special Operations Command." "Special Operations." Hendricks let that hang in the air. "And what brought you to a conventional ranger company?" "Requested transfer, sir. Personal reasons." The intelligence officers exchanged looks suggesting they knew more about those personal reasons than they'd discuss openly. Hendricks made a decision. Everyone except Staff Sergeant Foster dismissed. "Foster, stay." The room cleared quickly. Once alone, Hendricks's demeanor shifted, still professional, but more direct. "I've read your file, or the parts I'm cleared to read, sections redacted at levels I can't access, which tells me you were doing things very few people know about." He paused. "The shot you made today, initial engagement at 1,200 meters on multiple moving targets through concealment, that's consistent with capabilities I've only heard whispered about in classified briefings. So I'm asking directly, are you still operational for whatever unit you came from?" Ariana met his gaze steadily. "No, sir. I'm assigned to this company. What I did today was protect my Rangers using skills I've developed over my career. Nothing more complicated." "And if I asked you to make that shot again?" "I'd ask if Rangers needed protecting, sir. If yes, I'd make the shot." Hendricks studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough." "You saved 14 lives today, Staff Sergeant. That matters more than whatever complicated history brought you here." Dismissed. Ariana saluted and left, feeling Hendricks's eyes tracking her to the door. That evening in the team room, atmosphere had completely changed. Rangers who'd been ambushed told the story to anyone listening, embellishing slightly, but not much, because truth was impressive enough. Davidson had become Ariana's unofficial spokesperson, demonstrating with his hands how she'd fired 5 shots impossibly fast. "I'm serious, she just boom, 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 and 5 guys at over a kilometer just dropped, like watching someone cheat reality." Reyes added his perspective. "Without that initial shot on the machine gun crew, we'd have been shredded. No exaggeration. Trapped, surrounded, about to be wiped out." Torres sat in the corner, watching Ariana navigate sudden attention with visible discomfort. He caught her eye and gestured her over. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Not used to being center of attention," she admitted. "Preferred when people thought I couldn't shoot. Why hide it? 8 months you've been here. Never once showed what you could do." Ariana was quiet for a moment. "Because last time I showed what I could do, it started a diplomatic incident requiring 3 governments to quietly resolve. Target eliminated. Mission successful. But the shot I made, distance, conditions, impossibility, drew too much attention, made people ask how one sniper could make shots that violate physics. Those questions led to uncomfortable places. So they sent you here to basically retire. They sent me here to be a regular soldier, do regular things, keep my head down. She gestured around the room. Clearly didn't work out. Torres smiled slightly. For what it's worth, I'm glad it didn't. You saved my Rangers. That matters more than whatever political bullshit made someone nervous. Next morning, Ariana was called to the company commander's office. Captain Nicole Chen was solid, competent, fair, respected by soldiers. She gestured for Ariana to sit. Got an interesting call last night, she began, from people I didn't know had my direct line. They wanted to know about your performance, specifically if you were maintaining appropriate operational security regarding your capabilities. Ariana's expression didn't change, but internally she cursed. What did you tell them, ma'am? I told them one of my Rangers performed heroically under fire, saved American lives, and I was proud to have her in my company. She leaned back. They weren't happy, suggested you might need reassignment, somewhere even quieter. Ma'am, Chen held up a hand. I also told them if they tried reassigning you, I'd fight it through every command level I could reach, and I'd make sure the story got shared, widely enough that burying you would become politically complicated. She smiled. They liked that even less. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet. The compromise is you stay with this company but get attached to battalion headquarters as sniper section leader. You'll train designated marksmen, develop long-range reconnaissance capabilities, share expertise without being so forward. You make impossible shots that draw unwanted attention. Not ideal, but better than being buried in a supply depot. I can work with that, ma'am. Good. Because between you and me, Foster, having someone with your capabilities in my battalion makes me sleep better. Just try not to break physics too obviously when people are watching. 3 weeks later, Ariana stood on a range with 8 of the company's designated marksmen, teaching advanced techniques for long-range engagement. Davidson was there, having requested transfer to sniper section specifically to work with her. The thing about impossible shots, she was saying, rifle in hand demonstrating proper position, is they're only impossible until you understand all variables. Wind, humidity, temperature, altitude, Coriolis effect, ballistic coefficient, these aren't magical concepts, they're mathematics, and mathematics can be learned. She fired, and 850 meters downrange, a target disappeared. Then again, and again. A rhythm of precision that made students understand what she taught wasn't theory. It was lived experience from someone who'd made impossible distances look routine. After class, Davidson approached. Question. That shot you made, 1,200 meters through vegetation, multiple targets. You said it was just understanding variables. That's right. Some of us tried calculating what you did. Even accounting for every variable, probability of making those shots should be very low, Ariana agreed, which is why most people can't make them. But you can. Yes. Why? Ariana considered carefully. Because when I look through that scope, I don't see obstacles or impossibilities. I see solutions. Every variable is another factor to account for. Every challenge is another calculation. When math says the shot is possible, even barely possible, I trust the math and pull the trigger. She paused, looking at the range where students practiced. Also, she added quietly, because sometimes Rangers need protecting, and the only thing standing between them and catastrophe is one person willing to make shots everyone else thinks are impossible. So you make the shot. Deal with consequences afterward. Davidson nodded slowly, understanding more than she'd said. For what it's worth, really glad you were watching over us that day. Me too, Davidson. Me too. The story of what happened in that forest spread through military channels with the speed good stories do. Details got embellished. Some versions had her taking out 100 enemies single-handedly. Others claimed shots from 2 kilometers. But core truth remained. When 14 Rangers were surrounded facing certain death, one sniper made impossible shots look routine and brought everyone home alive. Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster trained dozens of snipers over following years, passing on knowledge that couldn't be found in manuals. Some students went to special operations, others stayed in conventional units but carried understanding that limitations were often just failure of imagination. She never talked about her time in special operations, never discussed classified missions or impossible shots that made governments nervous. But sometimes, late night in the team room, someone would ask about the longest shot she'd ever made, and she'd smile that small, private smile and say, 1,200 meters. Through vegetation. 5 targets. That's the longest shot I'm allowed to talk about. The unspoken part, what everyone understood but nobody said, was there had been longer shots, more impossible shots, shots that officially never happened in places that officially didn't exist. But those were classified at levels where even asking questions could end careers. What mattered was the present, training the next generation, being ready for when impossible shots needed making and there was no one else capable. Because sometimes the difference between mission failure and success isn't better technology or superior numbers. Sometimes it's one person with a rifle who can look at mathematics saying, impossible, and respond with, watch me. The quiet professionals, ones who prepare for moments they hope never come, who, when those moments arrive, make the impossible look easy, then go back to being quiet afterward. Staff Sergeant Ariana Foster was one of those professionals, and 14 Rangers who walked out of an ambush alive would tell you that sometimes the most dangerous person on the battlefield is the one you didn't know was there until bullets started flying true from distances that shouldn't have been possible. Never underestimate the quiet ones. They might just be waiting for the right moment to remind everyone what professionals look like when stakes are life and death. The enemy force that had planned so carefully, positioned so perfectly, and executed their ambush with such precision learned a lesson that would be passed down through their ranks as a cautionary tale. In modern warfare, you're never too far away to be touched. You're never too well hidden to be found. And sometimes, the person you should fear most is the one you never even knew was watching. Ariana continued her work quietly, training the next generation of precision shooters, passing on skills that had been earned through years of experience in places most people would never see. She taught them mathematics and wind reading and ballistics, but more importantly, she taught them patience, discipline, and the understanding that sometimes the best shot is the one you don't take, until the moment when it becomes the only shot that matters. And on ranges across military installations, young snipers would practice their craft, pushing their limits, testing their capabilities. And occasionally, when conditions were just right and the wind was steady and the math all lined up perfectly, they'd make a shot that seemed impossible. And they'd think of Staff Sergeant Foster, the quiet professional who'd proven that impossible just meant nobody had done it yet. Years later, when military historians studied the engagement, they would struggle to explain what happened in that forest. The after-action reports were detailed, the ballistic evidence was undeniable, but the mathematics of what Staff Sergeant Foster accomplished that day remained almost inexplicable to those who hadn't witnessed it firsthand. 23 shots, 23 hits, ranges from 550 to 1,200 meters, moving targets through heavy vegetation, 0 misses. The statistical probability was so low that some analysts initially suspected the reports were exaggerated. They weren't. Davidson, who went on to become a sniper instructor himself, would sometimes pull out the brass casings he'd collected that day, kept in a small wooden box on his desk. He'd show them to students who thought they understood the limits of precision fire, and he'd tell them the story of the quietest person he'd ever known, who turned out to be the most dangerous when it mattered most. "She didn't just save our lives," he'd say, holding up one of the casings. "She redefined what we thought was possible. And then she went right back to being so quiet you'd forget she was in the room. That's what a true professional looks like." The enemy fighters who survived that day never forgot the lesson they'd learned. In bars and safe houses across Eastern Europe, the story was told in hushed tones, not as a boast, but as a warning. There was an American sniper, they'd say, who could reach out and touch you from distances you thought were safe, Who could see you when you thought you were invisible? Who could end your life before you even knew you were in danger? They called her the Ghost in their language, a fitting name for someone who operated in shadows, who made the impossible look routine, who reminded everyone that in modern warfare, you're never truly safe. You're just waiting to find out if someone like her is watching. Ariana Foster never sought recognition, never wanted her name in newspapers or her face on recruitment posters. She understood that the most effective operators were the ones nobody knew about until it was too late. She continued her quiet work, training snipers who would go on to save lives in their own right, passing down not just technical skills, but the mentality that made impossible shots possible. The understanding that limitations existed primarily in the mind, and that with proper preparation, discipline, and trust in mathematics, what seemed impossible became merely difficult. And sometimes, late at night, when her former students faced their own impossible situations, surrounded, outgunned, staring at odds that math said they couldn't beat, they'd remember her lessons. They'd slow their breathing, trust their training, and take the shot that everyone said couldn't be made, because she'd proven it could be done. And in doing so, she'd given them something more valuable than technique or tactics. She'd given them the certainty that impossible was just another word for not yet attempted by the right person. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of courage.